So, hello, hello, hello. We're back again, Janine LaRue from LaRue List Cafe. And as always, I tell you that we have amazing guests. And once again, today, we have amazing guests. I am going to introduce each of our guests in a moment, but I want to tell you why this particular show today is so important. Our primary election day has been changed to July 7th, which is tomorrow. You have an opportunity to vote up until tomorrow. You get an opportunity to postmark your ballots. And I know a lot of people have questions as to how they do it. If they haven't mailed them yet, can they vote? Will there be polls for them to go to tomorrow? And just so much has been written about what has happened, even with elections in May, where people voted by mail. So today we have some wonderful experts, and I'm calling them experts because that's exactly what they are. We're going to start with the one expert who I just love because he's sitting here with his own little mask on. And once you see the mask, you understand what you're supposed to do. Here we have none other than Ron Chin, who is the former dean of the Rutgers Law School. He is the current professor there. He is the former public advocate for the state of New Jersey. Welcome, welcome, Ron. As always, I love having you on our show.
Great to be here, Janine.
And people
I can avoid not wearing this, even though I'm alone in my house. But
I see. I love it. And folks get the message. They know what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to vote. Thank you so much. The next person we want you to meet, none other than Jesse Burns. Jesse is the executive director of the League of Women Voters, and I have had an opportunity to work with Jesse a lot of times on a lot of major social justice issues. Welcome, Jesse, to LaRue List Cafe.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Another guy who is no stranger to anyone, Christian Fuscarino. He is the executive director of Garden State Equality. He's been on LaRue List Cafe at least 3 times, maybe 4. And thank you so much for joining us today, Christian.
Thanks for having me on, Janine. Looking forward to the conversation.
Aaron Green, an attorney. You and I are meeting, I guess, for the second time. I may have met you in the legislature last year when we had a magnificent lame duck session, got a lot of social justice bills signed into law. And you're with the Institute for Social Justice. Welcome today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, a young man who I get to know up close, who has been in my life for as long as he has been alive, even before he took his first breath. Freeholder Samuel Frisbee, my son. Welcome, Sam, to be here to talk about the county government and election day tomorrow.
Thank you for having me on today.
So there you are. That's the whole team. And we thank all of you for being here. And we're going to start with, because a lot has been said about vote by mail and what's been happening in the polls. I know that it's been kind of fascinating with the pandemic, but we did ask people, we were hoping that the governor would push back the primary election, and it did happen. Jesse, could you give us your take on this process over the last 4 months? Because it has been quite a ride.
Yeah, sure. So I think what's interesting is the League of Women Voters, we do this across the country, and every state has been different, but the recommendations have been pretty much the same. What we want and what we're actually seeing tomorrow is a hybrid election. We want to make sure that voters have multiple options to participate while still staying safe. So Over the last 4 months, we've been working on what that would look like, making sure that vote by mail was really accessible to folks, including ballot drop boxes, having the ballots mailed to folks, postage paid, but also understanding that vote by mail isn't an equitable, equal solution for everybody. So it's really important to also have in-person polling options available. I'm excited about tomorrow to see, how it all goes and make sure that tonight to make sure voters understand their options.
One of the things, thank you for that, Jesse. One of the things I noticed once the vote by mail, it was decided by the administration that it was actually going to happen, that it would be July 7th. I know the Institute went to court along with some other partners. Aaron, could you tell us about that lawsuit and what the outcome was? Has there been an outcome?
Yes. The lawsuit was filed after the May 12th elections. As many may know, there were some issues with vote by mail, specifically signature matching. So we had many of our partners join in. We filed a successful lawsuit, and we had a settlement. The settlement focused on a few components. One of the components is that the state will take better efforts to look at signatures and take into account that many people have different issues that may lead to a signature not matching. But more importantly, cure letter. So this will take place during this election. So if someone does not have a signature match, the state has to notify them within 24 hours. They will send them a cure letter, and that will provide the voter the opportunity to correct the error so their vote can be counted. So I want to raise two important issues about that. Is that it has to be emailed, brought in person, or dropped off by 2 p.m. on July 23rd, or it can be postmarked and mailed, but it has to be received by 8 p.m. on July 23rd. So that was very, very successful. I'm glad that we were able to be involved in that. Because we don't want people's ballots not to be counted, especially when it comes to signature matches, as we see around the country, that impacts Black and Brown communities disproportionately. So we have that legislation, we have that for this primary.
Thank you. And speaking of the Black and Brown and the signatures matching and things that can go wrong, Mr. Chen, we know some things did go wrong in the election in May. Could you walk us through what happened there and give us the pros and cons that at least they found out pretty much what has happened?
Right. Well, certainly the Attorney General has brought charges alleging a form of voter fraud in Patterson. I mean, they're just charges now, so like any lawyer, I will say they're just allegations. But from what I understand, from what we read in papers, there was a scheme to try to ask voters, tell them, give me your ballot, I'll collect it for you and send it on to the Board of Elections, and they either didn't do that. Sometimes they got a blank ballot. At any rate, there was a discrepancy between the number of ballots that they were supposed to receive and those that they had. And the point is this: I mean, there's no system made by human beings that is absolutely impervious to attempts to fraud. Vote by mail is no more susceptible to voter attempts of voter fraud than any other system. In some ways, maybe it is less susceptible because, and the proof is in the pudding. They got caught. When you do something like ask a voter, I'll collect your, I'll deposit your ballot for you, or you try to get ballots surreptitiously, people tend to notice. They find out that their ballot wasn't counted, or they remember that they gave their ballot to someone, and look, they tried and they got caught. So that is really not evidence, it seems to me, to suggest that vote by mail is any more susceptible to voter fraud than any other system. I mean, Frank, if someone successfully hacked in to a voter machine, it might be less obvious that something had happened than something like this, which frankly literally leaves a paper trail.
Now, speaking of the voters, and Sam, I know that you've been involved in what's going to go on in Mercer County. Are there polls? Tell us about the polls that are open, at least in this county. And then I'm going to go back to Jesse and talk about what do polls look like statewide.
Sure. This election is a very important election because it's the next election. Lack of familiarity many times creates confusion. And so we want to make sure that people aren't confused about where they need to go. Many of the voting polling places have been consolidated. So my voting polling place is not open. I would have to go to a different place. But what the state has done is they have made sure that there are ballot boxes in every county. So there are 5 ballot boxes in every county. And people need to figure out if they have not already sent their voter card in. They need to find out where their voter boxes are. In Mercer County, we have one in Hamilton, there's one in Trenton, in front of our clerk's office, one in Hopewell, one in East Windsor, and one in Princeton. And so people can go to those voter boxes and drop off their ballot up until 8 o'clock at night. And one of the things that's really important, at least in Mercer County, I know, and I think it's statewide, but if you are in line, they treat those voter boxes just like a polling place. So if you are in line at 8 o'clock, they must allow you to put your ballot into the voter box. And it's really important that people recognize that. I love being able to go into the polling place, but during this election, because of COVID, the only people that will be able to vote and touch the machines if they go into their polling place are people that are differently able. So people that are disabled, that have a different ability, they will be the only ones that can go into the booth. Everyone else is going to have to fill out a provisional ballot.
And Jesse, what does it look like statewide?
So that's what is available statewide. There's limited polling locations. Folks are going to have to vote using a paper provisional ballot at polling places unless they require an ADA accessible machine because they have certain disabilities. The League of Women Voters of New Jersey, we have a COVID resource page on our website that has all of the polling place locations, all the secure ballot drop box locations for the whole state. And the New Jersey Division of Elections also updated their polling place locator. So when you put your address in, it will give you the consolidated polling location for this election for tomorrow. But I do encourage people, as Sam mentioned, if you go to a polling place and you don't require an ADA accessible machine, you're going to be voting using a paper provisional ballot. So I encourage folks that have their vote by mail ballots to, sit with that at home, vote that, and then bring it to a ballot drop box location. It's going to be just a little bit of a safer way to vote.
So, Christian, we know that in past years, there are people who say, why bother to vote? Some of this sounds a little complicated. Today is the 6th of July. Folks, they might not even be able to find the mail that they got, the ballot they got. Tell us, why is this election so important?
Well, this, as your son said, this election is so important because it's the next election. Mm-hmm. And getting out and making sure that your voice is heard is one of the most important parts about our democracy. And so when we think about the injustices that are taking place across our nation, the folks that can most often hold others accountable are those in elected offices. And it's the people's responsibility to hold those in elected offices accountable. And this is our opportunity for the primary. I think folks should be thinking a lot about who they want to see up in the general election during this session. Is this going to be someone that is going to be able to perhaps knock out an opponent that is an incumbent who has been voting down in DC against the issues that you stand for? And so be mindful that maybe the candidate that you're looking to vote for may not perform as strongly in the general as a candidate that may have some differing opinions, but is with you, a percentage of the way. So think about viability as you're making your voice heard. But definitely we should be focusing on the conversations that are taking place nationally right now. Be mindful about who's been going to protests and speaking out against systemic racism at every level of government. Because if the person that you're voting for wasn't at those protests, then I bet that they're not going to be there for you when they're elected into office. So just make sure that you're picking a candidate that stands with you on the issues that you care about.
Thank you. So there we have it in a nutshell. We do have a lot of issues that are going to be coming up as we move beyond tomorrow. I know, Jesse, one of the things you and I have spoken about is the same-day voter registration. We're hoping that to get young people involved, and I know, Aaron, your group is very much engaged in that. Ron, I don't know where you stand on the same-day voter registration. What's your opinion on that?
At the law school, who tried to litigate it, Frank Askin, he wasn't successful. But so now our path would be, I suppose, be legislative. But I do voter protection work at Election Day. I did when I was public advocate, and since then in the law school. And the number one problem is someone is not in the poll books.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one reason why they're denied the right to vote. They're allowed to vote provisionally, but if they're not in the poll books, it's not going to do any good. So that is the number one problem in New Jersey that disenfranchises people, and it always hurts communities of color disproportionately.
Well, I'm hoping that we're looking to do something legislatively about that to be ready for the next election. Sam says the next election, which will be, I would think, the biggie. I mean, this is the biggie. There are a lot of issues on that ballot. Of course, Christian, we have the marijuana question going to be on the ballot in November, and we're hoping to get a lot of people engaged in that as well. So that's it. I don't know if the panel has anything else you would like to just raise about tomorrow's election before we sign off.
I would like to say that as important as this election is for, what's up ballot, what's down ballot is just as important. This is the election where we elect committee people. And for people who don't understand how people actually get on a ballot, that's how people like me actually get on a ballot. And so it's really important that people go down and they select their committee people, because those will be the people that will hear your discussions and say, that person really did not fight a battle for us. Why are you voting for them to be on the ballot again? And so we really need to make sure that we go all the way down ballot and make sure that we're doing that well as well.
And as you talk about the down ballot, and I'm looking again at the up ballot, I guess one of the most closely watched congressional races will be down in the Atlantic County area to see what happens with Bridget Harrison and Amy Kennedy. And then you have Van Drew, who switched from being a Democrat to being a Republican. So that's going to be very closely watched all year long, for sure. Christian. And
I just want to note the historic candidacy of Will Cunningham, who's also up in that district, who would be the first Black gay man that New Jersey sends to Congress if he were to be Van Drew. So
and people are very impressed by him. Yeah. Very, very impressed by him. He has the problem of going against the money and the Kennedy name, but the fact that he has hung in there to this point, it's going to be fascinating to see how that comes down. All right. Well, anything else from the panelists?
No.
Thank you so very much, Aaron.
Yes, if I could just be brief. One thing I would share about the election and going forward, the Institute has released a document after you say Black Lives Matter, 10 things that you can do. and it focuses on policies on reparations, universal basic income, policing in communities. It really shows how voting and advocacy go hand in hand, and things that we could be doing in our community. So I just encourage people to exercise their right to vote, and also hold elected officials accountable throughout their tenure to get things that you need for your community. Thank you for the opportunity.
On that note of police reform, July 15, there's going to be a major public hearing that is being led by Senator Linda Greenstein on police reform. So we'll be watching that very carefully as well. All right. Well, I thank you, all of you, for coming in today on such short notice. And let's see where we go tomorrow. I'm sure we'll have some more conversations tomorrow to make sure people go out to vote. And so, Samuel Frisby, we are happy to have you here. Thank you so very much. Christian, thanks for coming on as always. Jesse, always my partner in crime on all the social justice issues. Aaron, once again, it's a real pleasure to see you and to work with you. And there's the man with the last message across his face, none other than Ron Chin. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us on Laroulas Cafe as we talk about tomorrow, will you make your voice heard? Get out there and vote. Thank you.